Okay, let's talk about a place in Argentina, the province of Córdoba. There's this one organization there called COPEC, and it has a really bold vision for the future. Officially, it's a strategic planning council. But, depending on who you talk to, it's either this brilliant blueprint for progress, or it's a pretty sophisticated tool of control. So what is the real story of COPEC?
Right. Is COPEC this forward-thinking group guiding Córdoba to a better future with expert help? Or is it something else, something more complex, a tool for social control that's just disguised as neutral, technical planning? To figure this out, we really have to look at the two very conflicting stories.
All right, so to really get our heads around this puzzle, let's start with the official version of events. You know, how COPEC describes itself to the world, based on its own documents.
So on paper, COPEC's whole purpose is to be this meeting place, bringing together the government, private businesses, and university experts. The idea is to create a single, shared plan for the province's future. And you gotta admit, it sounds great. It's ambitious, it's logical, and it seems really forward-thinking.
Their strategy really comes down to these four main pillars. First, a balanced province with a budget surplus. Second, an innovative one, ready for things like AI. Third, a productive province, creating jobs to end hunger. And fourth, a peaceful one, all about human rights. I mean, these are fantastic goals, right? Any government would be proud of them. It paints this picture of really smart, rational, progressive leadership.
But here's the thing. That official story, it might not be the whole story. To really get what COPEC is, we have to go all the way back to when it was created, 2008. And that year was just intense, a time of major crisis, not just in Argentina, but all over the world.
Just think about the timing for a second. On a global scale, the financial system is basically in a full-blown meltdown. Then, back in Argentina, the country is split right down the middle by this huge conflict over agricultural taxes. And it's right in the middle of all that chaos and uncertainty that the government in Córdoba creates COPEC. And that context, it's everything. COPEC was literally born from crisis, with this promise to bring stability when everything else felt like it was falling apart.
Okay, so now let's flip the coin and look at the counter-narrative. Because while the official story sounds great, critics and analysts see something very different. And for them, it all starts with one simple question. If this is a planning council, why isn't it more transparent? The first big red flag that analysts point to is that for an organization that's all about open planning, actually getting a hold of its most important documents and data is, well, surprisingly hard. And this isn't just a vague feeling. It gets really specific. When researchers tried to look at key reports, documents that COPEC itself cites, like a study on emotions and happiness or a technical note, they just hit a dead end. 404, page not found. And we're not talking about minor flyers here. This is supposed to be the analytical work that justifies public policy.
And as one analysis puts it, this gap, this big difference between saying you're transparent and what's actually available, well, it could feed suspicions about hidden intentions. It makes critics ask a pretty straightforward question. If the data's solid and the goals are for the public good, why hide the reports?
That lack of transparency is just the first crack in the official story. The second major point of criticism is where things take a really sharp turn. Critics argue that COPEC has grown way beyond just planning and has become a major player in the province's security operations.
Get this number, 2,111. That is how many new local guards COPEC was put in charge of training in just a single semester. Now, for a planning council, that's not a small side project. That is a massive state security operation. And when you look at what they're being taught, it gets even more interesting. This isn't just your basic security guard 101. The curriculum they manage covers everything from community conflict and legal codes to specialized stuff like rural security and toxicology. It even includes social topics like mental health and gender perspective. It's a full-on, comprehensive security education program, all run by an organization that's supposedly focused on long-term economics. So what is going on here? How do you explain the missing reports on one hand and this huge security training program on the other? Well, the deepest criticism of COPEC ties all of these threads together with a really powerful theory about how modern governments can work. And it kind of reframes this whole debate. That theory is called technocracy. And here's the core idea.
You take big, messy political questions, debates about our values and what kind of world we want to live in, and you reframe them as purely technical problems that only experts with objective data can solve. In that kind of system, all that messy democratic debate, it's seen as inefficient or maybe just ignorant.
And this is the heart of the critical argument, that COPEC, with its expert panels, its hard-to-find data, and its focus on security, is acting as a technocratic instrument. The real goal, critics say, isn't to encourage democratic debate, but to depoliticize it, to basically present one expert-approved path as the only logical option on the table.
You can see how these two ways of governing are just worlds apart. A political model is all about debating values. Power comes from the people. But a technocratic model is all about finding consensus based on data. Power comes from having expertise. So in that second model, if you disagree, you're not just offering another opinion, you're basically failing to understand the objective facts. One system invites everyone in, the other limits decision-making to a handful of certified experts.
So in the end, where does that leave us? We're looking at two completely different, totally opposing stories that are trying to explain the very same organization.
It's almost like you're looking at two different puzzles. On one side, you have the official story. It presents COPEC as this beautiful, balanced, harmonious thing, like that multicolored shape. A perfect symbol of rational planning. But then you have the critical view, which sees it as something more like that impossible Penrose triangle. It looks logical if you only look at one corner at a time, but when you try to see the whole thing at once, you realize it's a conflicting, paradoxical structure that shouldn't be able to exist.
And this all leads to a final, really important question that goes way beyond Córdoba. Look, we all want smart, effective solutions to our world's big, complex problems. We absolutely need experts. But the story of COPEC really forces us to ask, at what point does expert planning cross a line and start to push out public debate? And how do we make sure that the very systems we build to solve our problems don't wind up controlling us instead?